I was putting together some thoughts on this video when Todd Kendrick dropped an interview with Chris Perkins, and one of the answers that Chris gave really stuck out to me as the reason that I think this whole topic is important. I put a link to the full video and a timestamp down in the doobly-doo. Todd had asked Chris if there was anything that a dungeon master could do to foster the chemistry at a table that causes some groups to just click together. And Chris thought about it for a couple seconds and finally said, if you know your players and what they like in the game, then you can design your adventures to really meet what the players need. And with that need met, the players are more likely to relax, to encourage the other players, and to come together as a group. As dungeon masters, when we're talking about the game, we're usually talking in terms of rules, balance, puzzles, mechanics, story arcs, all useful if they're the kind of thing that are going to engage your players. The less we do, the more likely they are to snipe at each other, fight over loot, lead or bully, all things that can break up a game. But when we talk about our players and what engages them, we usually generalize. Power gamers, role players, audience members, they're a useful shorthand that is easy for people to grasp. But no one fits a trope 100%. Instead, we can talk about the specific types of fun they enjoy in the game at any specific moments, so that we can pick those out, we can emphasize them, and better grasp our players' engagement. Hi, I'm James, and on this channel I talk about the things that I think about, plan, and plot for my tabletop role-playing games. And today, that's MDA Framework, Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics. MDA Framework is a tool that designers use when they're designing a game to look at it and go, what kind of fun are we trying to give to our players? And how can we get there? And they start by looking at the types of fun that they like to give. Types of fun are called aesthetics. And those are formed by the moment-to-moment decisions that the players are going to be making in the game. Those are dynamics, which are shaped by the rules and the systems that you're going to put into the game. Those are the mechanics. If you have a game that is supposed to make you feel more powerful the further you go in the game, getting weapon upgrades, leveling up, choosing things, that's an aesthetic. How you're going to get that power, that is a dynamic choice that is shaped by the kinds of mechanics in the game. Is it a game with great stealth systems, or is it a game with great combat systems? Before we go any further, wherever else we talk about aesthetic, we're packaging a whole lot of things underneath that term. Something like sci-fi, dark fantasy, cozy, action, adventure, comedy. That's not what they're talking about in MDA. They're defining core attributes of fun. To put in our language, it's like character statistics. A cozy game has like an 18 in fantasy. Stardew Valley literally calls out wanting to escape in its title sequence, whereas a Souls-like game has like an 18 in challenge. These attributes, when combined together, create something of a class fantasy of game. It's why things feel like a dark fantasy game. People are notoriously bad about explaining why they like something and don't like something and realizing what's engaging them in a game. They can be playing Escape from Tarkov while telling you that they don't like challenging games. Yeah, I know you're watching this. Yes, I am talking about you. Game designers don't often have a direct line to their entire player base, but we do. If we listen, talk, and most importantly, observe our players, we can figure out what makes them tick. Why do they enjoy playing these games, even if they don't realize it themselves? And then we can use our knowledge to create a game that better engages them and delivers on what they need so that we create the optimal conditions for them to bond as a group of friends. Because a group that becomes friends is more likely to keep playing together. In the original paper that codified MDA, there's a link to it down in the description if you want to read it yourself. It's pretty short, but kind of dry. They define 8 reasons, it's 8, that somebody might find a game fun. They are sometimes criticized for only having 8 reasons, but in their defense, in the paper, they say includes but not limited to. They also assume that somebody will find different things fun within the game at the same time, and that those preferences are going to shift based on the activity in the game. Somebody might really like the challenge of facing a monster, but hate the challenge of PvP. Those 8 reasons are fantasy, expression, narrative, challenge, discovery, fellowship, surrender, and sensation. When they talk about fantasy here, they're not talking about like Lord of the Rings kind of fantasy. They're talking about escapism. You can be a barbarian instead of a teacher, an elf instead of a human. You can work a farm in a cozy town instead of being at a desk in JoJo Mart. You can be a dark wizard, and in this fantasy world, you can indulge the impulses and feel like what it is to be a dark wizard. This is where class fantasy comes from, where people saying, I want the monk to feel like what it is to be a monk. As a dungeon master, we don't have complete control over this. The system does a lot of the work, but we can try to mold it into something that better fits our players' ideas of what should be happening. We can allow new subclasses, create new magic items. We can create quests that will allow them to get special new abilities that will make it feel more like what they think a monk or a barbarian or a wizard should feel like. But ultimately, there's only so much you can change a system before you've redesigned the entire game. If class fantasy is I'm playing barbarian, I want it to feel like Conan, then self-expression is I'm playing Thrak, the orcish barbarian. I want my barbarian to be different from your barbarian. This is why people spend hours in character creators getting the face exactly right and agonizing over the perfect name. The important part for us as Dungeon Masters is to give these players a way to express themselves in the game world. They gain strongholds and followers. They have their story moments. If you get a player that likes narrative and expression, then they're going to write a backstory and they're going to expect parts of that to matter in the game world. If they engage with discovery and expression, then they may expect some story moments, some things to come up in gameplay about their character that they didn't know. Dark secrets about their past that reveal why they're here, like,
I am your father.
This has always been a core part of TTRPGs. You make your character, you get to pick the name on it, you get to figure out where your stats are, you get to pick your weapons or your spells or whatever you have. But in more and more recent editions, it's become more and more of the focal central point on how we're supposed to engage in the game and find our fun. When I look back at how I played in the 90s and the early aughts, and the art that was there that was kind of to inform how we were supposed to see our characters, a lot more of it was about how we fit in the party, not as much my character as an individual is cool. I do want the individual characters to be cool. I remember when I was playing in 2nd edition and you could basically just swap out any fighter for random fighter number 42. I liked in 3.5 when it mattered more that my character picked their talents and became more a specific fighter than, again, random fighter number 42. I do want my players to feel like their characters are cool, but I also want them to feel like they're a member of a party. They all get together and they like each other, like members of a band like Green Day or Weezer, not like the two brothers in Oasis. I don't know if this is rose-tinted glasses. Probably. I'd be curious what everybody else thinks. If you've got a person for whom narrative is a primary form of engagement and why they play the game, you're going to want to talk to them and find out what kind of other forms of engagement aesthetics will draw them into the game. If they're super into expression, for example, then they're probably going to take a greater hand in forming the game. They may even want to help you craft some of the stories. They're probably going to give you a backstory, and they're going to expect parts of that backstory to matter to the story in the greater whole. But if they're kind of just here to be told a good story, to just surrender to the rest of the group and have some pizza and good times, then they may be perfectly happy on a railroad, in which case you can take one of the published campaigns and run that for them. They'll be good. It all depends as well on what kind of narratives they like. I've said before that I'm not super into horror, but you put me in Alien and I'm good. I don't really like railroad campaigns where I don't get a choice in where the narrative is, but I make an exception for Last of Us. So it's specific, not general. We don't like all narratives, and it shifts from time to time. There are a few things that you can kind of bank on to give them like that narrative punch that feels like I really got something out of this. Capping off sessions and especially arcs with a big boss fight, even if it's not necessarily challenging, it feels thematic and theatrical. We're fighting this dragon in this erupting volcano. That can often feel to the player like they're earning an ending, like this is the epic conclusion. And then you follow it up with an epilogue that shows how whatever they've done during the campaign has altered the shape of the world. That can often help. You can make the NPCs feel like they're actually meeting a different character. You don't necessarily have to do voices, but write down who they are, what they believe, and have the player go back to that NPC time and time again. They feel like they're building a relationship with them. That can help them feel like the narrative is growing. Political shifting alliances, going over here, making a deal with this person, making a deal with that person, and it all coming to a head. That can also often feel like you're making, building towards a climax. If the player is into kind of how the other players engage, fellowship, you can try to get the other players involved, and that sometimes makes them feel really good that their story is kind of driving the entire campaign forward. This is sometimes active. You go to the other players and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Are you willing to, alter your character's story to join this character's story? Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. If they aren't, you can kind of slip it in the treasure, in the loot, and in the dungeon when they go to deal with this challenging tomb, because the player is into discovery. They found a tomb. They want to go over there. Super interesting. And this player over here has something going on. If the treasure or the tomb somehow turns out to wrap back to this character's narrative in a way that's believable, that will also help this player feel like whatever we do in the world, my narrative is part of it. And I'm now excited to go find out how my narrative is going to grow. Combat is a kind of challenge, but it's not the only kind of challenge. Challenge is effort plus risk. OSR players, for example, often avoid combat because it is so deadly. It's above challenging. You're really not supposed to be in a fight with a monster. It will kill you. But those games are still challenging. It's just not the combat. It's finding ways to avoid the combat. Whereas the skirmish players will often find the combat challenges fun because it tests their understanding of the tactics of the game, as well as their ability to build a character or a unit. They both often dislike 5e and find it too easy, just for very different reasons. Whereas somebody that dislikes combat may find 5e too difficult. They don't enjoy that challenge. They may, however, enjoy challenge in role-playing. They enjoy challenging a political situation where they have to find a way to get these squabbling nobles to all get along for at least 5 minutes. OSR kind of play will challenge your ability to create open-ended encounters that can be solved multiple ways, whereas the skirmish games will test your ability to create balanced yet unique encounters, and the role-play challenge will test your, as a dungeon master, ability to portray multiple NPCs with differing worldviews. Whatever the challenge is that they like, the point is to make sure that success feels earned. There are players that don't want the challenge in the game at all. They prefer something that's like a cozy RPG. They are probably best signified by players that don't want death in the game at all. They also often don't enjoy challenges where they could ultimately fail. They prefer a kind of fail-forward metric where they're never actually going to hit the bottom of the pit. They prefer to always be able to climb out of the proverbial pit. And that can be difficult to balance when you have a table with a bunch of players that really do enjoy challenges. The 5e answer to that is to make things like death saves really hard for you to fail, but you can fail them. For some people, even that's not enough, and you can try peppering your world with a lot of friendly clerics that are really very generous with the resurrects for some reason, but often even that's not enough, and it may come down to a heart-to-heart conversation with the player and say, look, is there something else in the game you really enjoy? And often they will say, yes, these other things I enjoy, and they're willing to go, okay, fine. I get why this has to be the way that it has to be, because you can't just give them plot armor. That doesn't feel fair to the other players. They will come to begrudge it. But it does come down to, maybe we can't play this game together. Maybe together we all play a different game, and I play the challenging game with my friends that do enjoy that kind of challenge. I play D&D for a lot of reasons, but fellowship is like my primary stat. I remember all the stupid things that we did when I was a player. I remember all the stupid things my players did that sent all my plans right into the fire, where we're all going, you do what exactly? I remember all the times I invited somebody else over that was a new person that I was hoping would be my friend. But some people, that's not why they play. This is not a thing for them. This is a game that they play, and they come to play in an optimal manner, have fun, and then say GG and go home and not think about the people that they just met. They are not looking for new friends. They're just looking for a game. If you're at a friendly local game store and you have one of these players there, do not try to engage them on the fellowship level of, look, we're all a party. Aren't we having fun together? We're such good friends. It's not why they're here. You're going to have to find the other aspects of the game that engage them so that they don't become disruptive. Otherwise, they will become just this rock weight around the rest of the party because they're not here for just good times and friends. Maybe one day they will become that friend. That day is not this day. We usually think about discovery in terms of exploration, exploring the world of the unknown out there, but it can be more than that. It can be discovering the story, it can be discovering a magic system, it can be discovering interactions within the game. There's lots of types of discovery. Like challenge, you're going to figure out what else the player enjoys and then pair that up with discovery to get them the kind of engagement that they're looking for. If you have a person that's really big on discovery and narrative, but not really big on self-expression, they may be fine with a railroad campaign. They just wanted to discover the story. But they are big on discovery, self-expression, and narrative, then they're probably going to want an open sandbox world where they are able to change it, and the story of the campaign is going to shape itself around them. There's a couple little tricks that you can use that will almost always trigger the discovery player's mind. The classic is
Secret tunnel! Secret tunnel!
Yet they've fallen a little bit out of fashion because people are worried that, well, if I put content back there and they don't discover it, it's wasted content. I told you before, just move it around, put it somewhere else, and you can reskin it. It's hobgoblins instead of goblins. They won't know the difference, and it won't take a lot of work from you. But when they discover it, they will feel really good about the fact that they bothered to go investigate this off branch of your dungeon. You can put it behind something not super obvious, not like you hear a whispering wind from behind the walls, but like a room where there's a tapestry and there have not been any tapestries throughout the dungeon. All of a sudden they will wonder why there's a tapestry there. Oh, look, go over there and make a perception check, elf character. Now you've discovered a secret door. They will feel really good about that. You can put vaults back there so that they find entire secret treasures. That's a lot of fun for the player that likes an extra challenge. You can make it a challenge up from the dungeon, and now they get to see if they're really clever. I would not make it the only way to the boss. That is bad game design because you can end up in this area where you're at a dead end. If they didn't make the perception check, you're just going to say, go back to that room and I'll let you make another one. And that's not really satisfying. That won't trigger the discovery aesthetic for this player. But if it's a passageway that will allow them to get back to the boss without having to go through 3 other rooms that would really tax their resources, that will often work. The classic one that you can basically always bust out is a map. You don't have to know where the map is going to lead. You just make it like the classic pirate map where there's maybe a bit of a coastline there and there's like an eagle rock and there's a waterfall over here and there's a hangman's tree or something over here. And later, when you don't know what you're going to do with the players and you're going, I don't know what we're doing this week, just draw the coastline and then put in the eagle rock and then put in the waterfall and then the hangman's tree. And the player will feel like it was meant to be there and go, we discovered it. Finally, this is great. Look at all this discovery we're doing here. And it will tickle their brain, even though you didn't know where it was going to be when you designed the map. You just gave it to them for a eventual rainy day when you didn't know what you're going to do with your players. Surrender is those games where you do something and you just kind of like zone out and you can do something for hours without even really engaging something. You're just in a complete relaxation, like listening to music and grinding materials in Minecraft. It can be really hard to satisfy that in an RPG. They are very active on the brain, but you can usually keep them from being disruptive. Let's say that the player really likes the fellowship of the table and they like the narrative story. We call that an audience member. Let them sit over there building their dice towers as long as they're not being disruptive. Yes, a lot of dungeon masters hate that. I'm not particularly a fan. A lot of players hate that. But as long as they're not upsetting anybody, they're not actively trying to sabotage things, it can be okay. It's annoying that they're not engaged in combat and they really don't know what their move is and they're waiting for somebody to tell them what the best move is. But often these players will also re-engage with different aspects of the game. No, they didn't care what happened in combat, but they really care what happens in their shopping session, and they want to go talk to that one NPC again because that's where they found their engagement. Give them that, and they're less likely to be super disruptive at other points in the game. Sensation is anything that is, well, a sense appeal to the game, like the character art, the book art, the minis, the terrain, the pizza. The dice are really big. People often buy the dice because they're pretty to look at. That's why they have hordes of them and they make a great sound as they roll across the table.
I love that sound.
If you saw the episode where Peter interviewed my D&D group, I cut a lot out of there where they were talking about the voices that I do, the miniatures that I paint, the terrain that I set up to bring the game to life for them. And those are all sensation aesthetic. They're also all things that I either paid money for or that I already kind of did before I was a dungeon master. If I'm telling you about a conversation that I had with a different person, it is natural for me to do a different voice for this person and then do a different voice for this person. It's just what I do. And I loved art before I loved Dungeons and Dragons. My wife and I cook for our players because it makes us happy to cook for them, and also because it adds to their enjoyment to have different foods and different things and to oogle and ogle over all the cooking that we've done, enjoy that kind of fellowship around the table, both the dinner table and the Dungeons and Dragons table. And no one can help what they find fun in a game, and I do think Dungeon Masters should give it a try. If you like it and you're not good at it, you will get better at it, but if it's not your thing, then it's not your thing. You should play to your strengths. And I do think it is unfair for players to expect sensation as the primary aesthetic of fun in a tabletop role-playing game. To expect the Dungeon Master to do voices, paint minis, provide terrain, draw maps, to provide a spectacle, though I don't think it's unfair of them to expect that from a stream. But the two things are not the same, they're just cousins. If we were doing the full MDA kind of shtick, we'd be designing the game from the top down, figuring out what kind of aesthetic we want to deliver, what kind of dynamics will fulfill that aesthetic, and then picking our mechanics. But we don't get to do that as Dungeon Masters because our games are already made. But they are kind of expecting us to shake things up a bit, emphasize certain things, kind of act like an equalizer, raise the bass a little bit, lower the treble, or do the opposite, whatever is going to meet our players' needs. If I want to create more of an OSR kind of aesthetic, if my players really find the combat challenging in Dungeons & Dragons, I could do something like, say, I'm going to make it so you only get one death save. If you're in combat and you die, you get to try one roll to save yourself. That will encourage the players to all try to go over and save you. It will also encourage them all to all have some way to get to some kind of a heal. And I could say that you get that one death save per combat. If you make it and you fall down again, then you're dead. Sorry, you've already made your death save. You got to make a short rest to get that back. And that will encourage the players to be even more careful about what kind of combats they get into. They will definitely want to try to stack the deck in their favor if that's what they're going to engage in combat. I could further do things like, say, the monsters are all going to get their hit dice bonus in damage. So if you're a 3 hit dice creature, you get +3 to damage every time you roll. Again, that is tipping the favors against them engaging in combat. But I had better make sure that all the other kinds of aesthetics that they're delivering on are not found in the combat system. Because if they have to go slay monsters to find those things, I've really made the combat really challenging. Some players may like that. Other players may be really stressed out by that and not enjoying your game. You're going to find the kinds of aesthetics that your players like and try to adjust the game to meet their needs. A player that has had their needs met or knows that they're going to be met in the future, you've delivered on this before, they trust that you're going to get to them, are far more likely to relax, engage the other players, let them have their fun because mine is coming. And then they have the opportunity to bond and become friends. And a group that bonds and becomes friends is a group that is going to keep playing this game. And that includes you. You should find your engagement in this game. If yours is not here, if you've just become this content engine that is spitting out whatever the other people at the table like, you're going to burn out as well. You're going to start feeling like they're taking you for granted, and this will not be fun anymore. And you're going to say, guys, I'm kind of feeling burnt out. I need to take a break. And this is supposed to be a fun game, an activity that we play and engage with our friends. You are a player too. Try to have some fun.